The future in context is taking it to the streets. If you travel by air or by Uber, you know something about dynamic pricing. The higher the demand, the more you pay. When dynamic pricing is applied to managing traffic, it's called congestion pricing. Motorists in London have been dealing with it for decades. But it's been a long time coming to American cities, and there's growing urgency to make it so. We'll talk about it for free, no matter when or where you're listening, on this episode of a new occasional series about transportation, transit, and infrastructure. All that coming up.
Sometimes good news is no news. And so we have a responsibility, I think, to make sure that we do cut through the BS and talk about real things happening.
We are introducing a new recurring series on the future in context. It's on transportation and infrastructure. Well, because moving people and things matter. Doing it well is important economically, socially, and environmentally, and governments are a huge player in all of this. It's a little something that we're calling Your Mileage May Vary, which will consider everything from roads, bridges, and ports to EVs, ride-sharing, and micromobility. And to help drive the conversation, we are joined by two of our own journalists.
I'm Skip Descant. I'm a staff writer with Government Technology magazine, covering transportation, transit, and infrastructure. I've been with the magazine for since about 2017. Very much in this space, and have been following the developments in technology.
Thanks for having us, Paul. I'm Jared Bray. I'm the senior staff writer for Governing Magazine, covering transportation and infrastructure. I started at the magazine in 2022. And before that, I'd spent most of my journalism career writing about things like housing and city planning, urban development, and stuff like that. So it's been fun to learn a little bit more about sort of how things move around the built environment.
Well, we're looking forward to exploring all of that with you in the coming months. Dynamic pricing is up first. It is so common that now even Wendy's is doing it. And they were talking about using it to determine the price of a burger depending on when you buy it, drive-through or step-up window. That news was met with cries of outrage on social media. Well, that's because that's what social media is there for. Now, with a wink and a nod to Car Talk, that beloved old series on NPR.
This next caller, this guy, you'd have to say was definitely out there. I mean, that would be a good way to describe him. Would you say?
Oh, yeah, he was out there all right, and it took us a while, but we eventually, even us.
It did take us a while, though. It's stupid.
We eventually caught on.
Let's begin with one of the Tappet brothers' favorite old gigs, which was Stump the Chump. The British tabloids tried to make it a scandal when the City of London introduced what they called the Central London Congestion Charging Scheme, a rather British way of talking about congestion pricing. What year was that, guys?
It looks like it was around 2003. The best I can figure out.
Sounds right to me. That's the year I graduated high school.
Yes, that's it. That is it. And at the time, I don't know whether you guys were thinking about transportation when you graduated high school, Jared, but we thought it would never happen here. Yet, here we are. Skip, what is congestion pricing?
Well, Paul, I think the best way to describe it is anyone who has ever driven on a toll road or a toll bridge has encountered the gist of what we're talking about here, which is where you pay money to use the roadway. In terms of congestion pricing, it's usually affiliated with a charge across an entire sort of district, a district in a city. In the case of London, it's central London. So you enter central London and you begin to pay a fee for doing that. So that's essentially what we're talking about here. We've always, it's kind of one of those things where I think where it becomes interesting and maybe even controversial or is that generally this is a place that people have always been able to drive for free, and now there's a charge attached to it.
There's a growing recognition that these things that people perceive as being free because they've had sort of open access to them, like roads, aren't free. Exactly, like they're paid for, and so I think there's an effort to get people to sort of pay a fee for using roads in certain areas, partly to manage congestion, but also partly to achieve other goals like reducing greenhouse gas emissions and things like that.
So is this a reckoning? What is driving all of this? We're talking about it 20 years on, and it looks like it is hitting critical mass. What's driving that, Skip?
Well, Paul, I think the key points here to note are increasing traffic congestion. Metros, regions all across the United States have been, we keep seeing those VMT, the vehicle miles traveled numbers keep going up. The roads are becoming increasingly more congested. Then the other item, of course, are the climate goals that many metros have put in place. They have definite desires to reduce their greenhouse gases. And of course, transportation is a huge contributor. In fact, it is probably the single largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. It's in the United States, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40%. So again, getting some cars off the road is central to the thinking there. And I think, very often the way you do it is not so much with the carrot, but with the stick. And that's kind of what congestion pricing ends up being. Now, and the other side there is the need to fund other transportation systems, public transit, funding new bike lanes, and those kinds of infrastructure developments. That takes money, and congestion pricing has it's a way to raise some funding. So I think those are the big takeaways from my perspective.
It ends up being a little bit of a carrot and a little bit of a stick, because there's the stick, which is the fee that you don't want to pay. They might keep you off the road, but if you do pay it, there's a carrot of sort of funding the alternatives, where it's like you do get maybe some better transit, some bike lanes, some walking paths, whatever. If it's successful in raising the kind of funding that does fund the alternatives, there can be a little bit of both. I mean, that's sort of the theoretical wishful thinking aspect of it. How well it works out in practice is kind of TBD in the U.S., but there's a little bit of both of those aspects of it.
The roadways themselves could be less congested. I mean, ideally. So the driving experience could be improved.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I think that's actually what motivates people.
Where does the gas tax come into all of this, Jared?
So there's like these related trends that aren't really about sort of managing congestion, so to speak, which is sort of a big metro area problem, urban problem. But everywhere in the U.S., cars have become more fuel efficient, and people are buying more and more electric vehicles, which don't use gas at all. And the gas tax itself has been one of the main ways that the federal government and states fund transportation infrastructure projects. The gas tax itself hasn't been raised at the federal level since, I think, the late 1990s. I would need to probably fact check that, but a lot of states are sort of loath to raise them as well, just because it's politically sort of toxic to raise that tax. And so you're seeing revenues shrink from the gas tax, and that's one of the main sources of funding for transportation. So governments are looking for alternatives to that, and one of the ways you can sort of conceptualize raising funds without using gas taxes with vehicle miles traveled fee, which is basically a way of measuring how much a single driver uses certain roadways and charging them based on that. You can do that sort of at the end of the year with an odometer check, or you can do it with sort of more sophisticated GPS type technologies. There's a bunch of pilots in the works at various states, and the federal government has a pilot it's working on as well to sort of test out how you might price roadway usage without relying on the gas tax entirely.
Skip, earlier you mentioned that there really is no one-size-fits-all approach to congestion pricing. What is the range of congestion pricing proposals that are out there?
The one that really is moving forward in the biggest way is the proposal in New York City. And this is where they would be charging vehicles traveling below 60th Street in Manhattan. And in fact, I think the original proposal was 96th Street. So they kind of scaled it back, if you will. But again, and this too, though, it's being challenged from a variety of legal fronts. You've got lawsuits filed even by the teachers union, I believe, in the city, as well as the state of New Jersey, basically saying, you're taxing our residents to go into the city, so that, again, it's moving forward, but as many things in the United States, it's fits and starts, held back sometimes by legal challenges, and so we'll have to see how that eventually plays out. Los Angeles Metro, the big transit provider in LA, is doing what it's calling its traffic reduction study, and this is aimed at looking at some of the most traffic clogged parts of the region. One area is looking at downtown LA as a district, I guess, in terms of a congestion pricing district. Another proposal is sort of that area between the San Fernando Valley and the west side around the Santa Monica Mountains. And you've got a lot, the freeways there are very congested. And then there's the other proposal looks at congestion pricing on the I-10 freeway between downtown LA and Santa Monica. So, and again, we'll have to see where, all of that sort of plays, where that process plays out. And as far as the time frame, I first heard of this probably 3 years ago, and I'm not sure it's moved a whole lot since then, but nonetheless, it's out there. In the San Francisco Bay Area, you've got the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which oversees transportation across essentially the 9-county region in the Bay Area. And they are looking at a number of different proposals and holding all of these different public engagement meetings with the public to explore how to apply road usage fees on their freeways during peak travel time. So it wouldn't be all the time, but during those peak times. So those are the different ideas that's being batted around here in the United States, and these are very big proposals that affect a lot of people, and so the idea is to really study them closely.
And then in San Diego, they seem to have hit a bit of a dead end, at least for now. Jared, you conducted an exit interview with one of the key instigators behind that. The fact that it was an exit interview probably tells us a little bit about how things are going.
Yeah, that's right. So the San Diego Association of Governments, which is a sort of big regional council of governments there, hired a guy, a transportation planner named Hassan Akrada, to sort of lead the agency for a while, and he put a lot of his own sort of might, so to speak, behind a plan to do a per mile fee, a road user charge that would sort of charge people per mile they drive in certain parts of San Diego, partly to disincentivize sort of usage of certain roads at certain times so that you could reduce congestion that we talked about earlier, but partly also to sort of fund expansions of public transit service in the region. And he got that into a plan that was then voted on by the sort of board, the council, and so they approved the plan, but they then, as soon as they voted to approve it, they said they have to remove the road user charge, because in the interim, what happened was there was just basically this full political backlash to the idea that people should be charged based on how much of the road they drive on. Like a lot of the government officials that are on that association are, represent suburban parts of San Diego area, and they're not necessarily living the downtown areas, and so a lot of their constituents are reliant on cars and roadways, and I think it just struck a sour note for a lot of the sort of for a lot of those leaders, and they just fully rejected it essentially, and pretty soon after that, Hassan Akrada decided he couldn't push much further on that particular item, and he resigned.
Pricing is not just about taxing. Pricing is also a way to manage congestion. Mm-hmm. But if this region or any region is serious about funding their future transportation, they have to figure out a way to pay for it.
He was there for 5 years, so he did a lot of work and he helped put together a lot of planning. But his big push was for this charge that just didn't get across the finish line.
Skip, when thinking about this, what are planners and elected and appointed officials, what ought they be thinking about in designing these plans.
Right. I'm going to turn back to what Michael Manville, he's a professor and chair of urban planning at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. He was speaking during the Commotion LA conference back in November. And what he really tried to stress is that it's so important that governments really come to an understanding of what they're trying to achieve with this big piece of public policy. If reducing greenhouse gas emissions is what it is that you want to achieve you have to really structure your plan around that goal, which would really be to reduce as many cars as possible. If it's to generate revenue, then structure your plan around that goal, which would be to basically charge where reducing congestion isn't actually the end result that you're looking for. You just want to charge every car going on the freeway, even if it's a small amount. So the idea is to really be clear about what your goals are, and of course, he left with the somewhat sort of cynical takeaway, and I can't say that I disagree with him. And he said that don't try to sell this on the climate improvements alone, because to quote Manville, the dirty secret about climate, and maybe it's not that much of a secret, is that most people at the end of the day don't care. And I think he's right. I think that's not the way to sell these proposals to the public. Probably the best way to sell these proposals to the public is to tell them that their driving experience will be improved.
And that's important because America is fundamentally a car culture.
It is fundamentally a car culture, and it doesn't want to change that fundamental aspect of who it is.
It's been interesting to sort of observe the sort of salience of the climate issue as it sort of waxed and waned over the last half decade or a decade or so. Like, it seemed like a decade ago, it wasn't really a thing that was motivating a lot of political decisions. And then maybe 4 years ago, it became this thing that everybody was sort of talking about all the time, and it informed a lot of public policy. People sort of perceive their daily lives and their ability to sort of like just do their lives. We're not seeing the political will to make big changes around daily life based on climate concerns.
So off the top, we talked about the City of London and their approach to congestion pricing that is now 2 decades old. And here it's still at the proposal and fighting amongst ourselves stage. And I suppose, just to go back to the San Diego example, we heard from the former planner there about taking the long view, and that to build a future is hard.
In history, in the world, anything you do that means anything or worth anything is going to be expensive, hard to do, and take a long time. And that's no difference. We designed our lives in our nation around the car, and it's hard to get away from that. But to put a multimodal system and to fund it, it's not easy. It's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of efforts. Mm-hmm. And I am not surprised by that, because you name anything in the world that's worth anything that didn't cost a lot of money and took a lot of time, and so that this is like no secret, but you have to keep trying to do the right thing, trying to reimagine the future.
It's clearly true that when you want to do sort of big, tough things, it's going to take a long time, and it takes more than one political cycle in a lot of cases to get big changes done. With the stuff like congestion pricing, with vehicle miles traveled feed, and to some degree, the public officials are going to have their hands forced on some of these issues, right? Like the gas tax is going to shrink so much that everyone's going to have to figure out an alternative for it. With congestion pricing and with this sort of like quality of life and the sort of free flowing character of urban freeways, it's not clear to me that has to get better. It could just get worse. Like we could try to solve the problem. And we probably will try to solve the problem in some big places, like they're going to try to do in New York. But Americans have this pretty remarkable ability to just suffer the consequences of decisions they they make as a public for a long time, right? I mean, we live in a built environment that is in so many ways compromised by bad decisions we made in the past, and there's negative outcomes to it, right? And we just endure them or don't. I mean, they have some people have their lives sort of very very negatively impacted by these things, but it doesn't always, it's a matter of when it reaches the point of you have to act, and that's just always going to be a question.
And Skip?
I mean, it will take the public to make a decision about what kind of an environment they want to live in, and yes, it's the land uses that we have now. We can't go back and change the built environment. We've got to work with what we have now. And it's not always going to be a great solution, and it's not always going to be a solution that makes everyone very, very happy.
So the closing thoughts on this: what should policymakers be thinking about, and what do drivers/taxpayers need to come to terms with on all of this too?
Well, I'm going to say I think policymakers should first be thinking about the most effective ways to engage with the community and the public, because that's going to inform the process going forward. And, and it's not the public coming forward and saying, don't do anything. No, we actually have to do something, but how should we do it? That sort of participatory process is what has to happen. And that's how you get a solution that quite frankly, people will accept.
You asked about sort of how should drivers be thinking about this too, and one of the things I like the most about being a reporter is that a lot of stuff that I take for granted in my daily life gets sort of undermined when I'm talking through issues with people and doing research and stuff like that. And I feel like if people who use the transportation system could think a little more about sort of the ways it's paid for and it's maintained and it's operated and built by a whole sort of network of institutions and governments and things like that, you have a better appreciation for the decisions you make in your own life. It's like, I think a lot of people sort of take for granted that roads exist and they exist to be driven on and things like that. But it's like, actually, we recreate these things and expand them all the time with our own sort of voting and our daily sort of decision making about how we live and stuff like that. So it's things like congestion pricing reflect that there's a whole sort of like matrix of factors that go into sort of what makes a transportation system work or not work. And I hope more people sort of appreciate how much effort it goes into maintaining the transportation system.
And at the end of it all, your mileage may vary. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. This is fun.
Skip Descant and Jared Bray cover transportation and infrastructure by day, and listen to old Car Talk episodes by night. The result is this occasional series on the future in context called Your Mileage May Vary. Our editorial and production team includes Ashley Silver, Theo Douglas, Zoe Manzanotti, and Kaylee Tedrow. Our executive editor is Noel Nell, and our editors-in-chief are Dustin Heisler and Kathleen Robinette. You can subscribe to the show for free on YouTube and most anywhere you find podcasts. Search for the show by name or just type tfic.tech into your favorite browser. I'm Paul Taylor. We're glad you're here. Thanks for listening.